is Yanni Aviles. I'm the Public Programming Officer here at the New York City Department of Records and Information Services, STORS for short. We house the city's municipal archives and library, our mission being to foster civic life by preserving and providing access to the contemporary and historical records of New York City government and its peoples. Alvin Eng's memoir, Our Laundry, Our Town, My Chinese American Life from Flushing to the downtown stage, was published by Fordham University Press in 2022. He is an adjunct assistant professor of speech communications and theater arts at BMCC. He was also an assistant professor in the theater department of Goucher College, a visiting professor of playwriting with the MFA program in creative writing and literary translation at Queens College, and the MFA creative writing program at St. Francis College. Eng holds a Master's of Fine Arts degree from the Graduate Musical Theater Writing Program, Tisch School of the Arts at New York University. So now I'll just hand it over to Alvin to share their screen and begin this amazing conversation that we're all really excited for. So welcome. Go ahead, Alvin.
Great. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Yanni, for this, and thank you, Doris, for having us, and thanks everyone for joining us for your lunch hour. Yes, I'll be reading from my memoir, Our Laundry, Our Town, and I'll be showing a few slides as well. So I just want to, this is the book cover, so I just wanted to show that for everyone. And okay, and it talks about growing up in Flushing when I did. I'll be reading from 2 chapters and then just describing things, and then we could have some more conversation. So the full title is My Chinese American Life from Flushing to the Downtown Stage and Beyond. And I will begin with reading from chapter 1, which is called The Urban Oracle Bones of Our Laundry, Channeling China's Last Emperor and Rock and Roll's First Opera. While I've been blessed to have always had a roof over my head and the honor of living with loved ones, when I was growing up, homelessness was a constant spiritual state. A child's longing to belong is one of the most powerful forces and relentless muses on earth. In every culture, belonging has many different nuances of meaning and resonance. What and who exactly constitutes that destination of longing changes with every age, and in childhood with every grade. What never seems to change is the feeling that we never quite arrive, and when or if we do, it only lasts for a fleeting time and was never quite what we expected. These memoir portraits are an attempt to decode and process the urban oracle bones from growing up as the youngest of 5 children in an immigrant Chinese family that ran a hand laundry. Our family was born of an arranged marriage, and our laundry was in the Flushing, Queens neighborhood of that singular universe that is New York City in the 1970s. Like many children of immigrant or other family origins in the late 20th century America, I was constantly seeking American frames of reference with which to contextualize my own outsider experiences and sensibilities. And although Flushing became New York City's second Chinatown during the 1980s, and some people call it the People's Republic of Flushing, in the 1960s and 70s, we were one of only a fistful of Chinese families there. I know it's hard to believe now. But the Flushing of my childhood was still basking in the afterglow of the post-World War II suburban baby boom. That boom was celebrated at the 1964-65 World's Fair. And this is my family at the 64-65 World's Fair. I'm the youngest, so that's me in the red striped shirt. That's my father, my brother Herman, and brother Gene. And then also that's my brother Vic, and my father, my Sister Jane, and me. Sorry, and so just wanted to give you a little bit of that, and so we'll come back to that in a second. Okay. That World's Fair was the zenith of the American century, when anything was supposed to be possible. In this euphoric mood, Flushing immigrants were the last wave who gave up everything. They had forsaken their names, their language. Many would have changed their appearance if they could, just to get a whiff of the American dream. This is also the cover of the book. That's me when I was 6 with my mother. And our Fujian Chinese hand laundry was a long, narrow, railroad-style store that stretched from a parking lot in the rear to Flushing's bustling Union Street in the front. Going from the back door to the front door, the way we entered every morning, the rear room was the family area, comprising a kitchen, dining, and napping area. This is where we all ate and where the kids did their homework, and we goofed off between chores. The middle room was where the ironing and wrapping of laundered garments took place, and the middle room had, as you can see, these long rectangular padded tables for ironing and sorting laundry and large white metal sewing stations. This was the largest room and also primarily the court of our mother, Alvin Eng, or the Empress Mother, as she is anointed in this book. In the middle room, the Empress Mother took her breaks, read the Chinese newspapers, and listened to her beloved Cantonese opera records. The front room, and this is the front room, and that's me with my father in the front room. And I'm holding a plate because I guess I'm always looking to get something to eat. The front room was where our family, or what I, at least in my last Emperor Flushing persona, referred to as the Eng Dynasty. This is where the Eng Dynasty interacted with the outside world. After entering through the front door, customers stood behind a wall-to-wall wooden counter. This is where they dropped off their dirty laundry and later picked up and paid for their cleaned wrapped laundry. This was the smallest room and also the domain of our dad, Ginghua Eng. Between greeting customers and tending to all matters of laundry business, this is where he listened to WCBS News Radio 880 on his small transistor radio, and where he read the daily news. On most busy Saturdays, the entire family would be in this room tending to customers. Now, the middle and front rooms, the walls were lined with floor-to-ceiling shelves of rows and rows of brown paper wrap packages of the customer's laundry. Each brown paper package had a different colored ticket on the outside, and in my child's mind's eye, each brightly colored ticket was a window into a different apartment of the big brown building that was represented by the shelves of wrapped laundry packages. The clean garments wrapped up in these packages were the silent witnesses to the events and rituals that made up the lives of their wearers. The wearers all belonged to families in which both parents did not work 12 hours a day in the laundry, 6 days a week. Instead, the fathers worked only 5 days a week, 9 to 5 in an office. The mother was a full-time stay-at-home mom, and both of them spoke perfect English. I called this building the Great Wall of Laundry. Now, because my dad spoke English and the Empress Mother did not, Dad's station in our laundry and in our family was on the front line. See, Dad's was usually the first face customers would see as they entered the laundry. Always dressed in his white button-down shirt with a pen holder on the left front shirt pocket, he sat behind the front counter like a target and went eyeball to eyeball with each and every customer, hustler, and angry war veteran who walked through the laundry door. People would routinely open that door and take potshots like, "Can you speaky Englishy, Charlie? No ticky, no shirty." Dad would take one for the family and grow sullen and speechless. The Empress Mother, however, would respond to these taunts with a lusty, "Aya, mo young bakui, kesi mben." Useless white devil ghosts. You can step on shit and it will not bend. This is translated from that delicate Toisan dialect of Chinese, Cantonese, surely one of the overlooked Romance languages of the 20th century. See, the Empress Mother station in our laundry and in our family abutted the wall that divided the front room public business space from the private family space. And because the Empress Mother could stay behind my dad, she got to keep her fiery Toisan core together. And from the late 19th to the late 20th century, 80% of Chinese immigrants to America emigrated from Toisan. During this time, Toisan was the dominant dialect and aesthetic of the Chinatowns and working class Chinese communities throughout North America. In this light and in that era, the Toisanese were very much like the Sicilians. Both groups were Southern outcasts, mostly farmers who were looked down upon by their supposedly more sophisticated governing northern brethren. Guangdong and Sicily are also geographically separated from their respective mainlands. Guangdong is isolated by a foreboding mountain range, and until the early 20th century was accessible only by sea. This separation and isolation instilled a staunch, independent spirit in its people. In North America, Toisan towns, like Sicilian enclaves, operated under their own rules, regulations, and justice systems. When words, deeds, and laws failed, there was always the meat cleaver. Well, I thankfully never saw my parents pull actual meat cleavers on each other. I did witness their weekly, sometimes daily tremors of psychological warfare on each other grow more viciously antagonistic week after week. To escape the oftentimes suffocating and intimidating environment of our laundry, thankfully my brother Herman and I, we bonded and created a joyous bond of a world of our own through the power of rock and roll. Let me go back to some slides here. And this is me performing later on. I would go on to be in punk rock bands. And I'm performing here with my band, The Grips, back in the 1980s at the bitter end on Bleecker Street. And this is me with my brother Herman later on. He grew up to become a great musician and a guitar tech. He's gone on the road with Bob Dylan, with Paul Simon. But it all started with one album in particular. Everybody on the block is talking about Tommy, raved Herman. The Who are even going to play the whole thing at Woodstock. We have to get it. But $6 for one album, I asked, now being a seasoned, suspicious music consumer at the age of 7. It's a double album, just like the White Album, Herman carefully presented his claim. And it's only on sale at Corvette's. Corvette's? That's so far away and it's pouring out, I objected. Hey, it's 8+ at Record Spec on Main Street. I don't know, Herm. Al, we got to do it. The rain's letting up. It'll be worth every cent, I promise, Herman made his closing argument. Okay. I reluctantly handed over my hard-saved laundry salary allowance to Herman, putting our combined kitty over the magic $7 threshold, because there was tax to pay on records after all. And off we rode on our Schwinn banana seat bikes through 3 neighborhoods and over 10 miles round trip through a lighter but still steady rain to E.J. Corvette in Douglaston, the only store in Northeast Queens where we could actually afford to buy Tommy. And Herman was right. It was worth every cent. Herman and I started quoting the lyrics from Tommy to each other to the point where those lyrics became virtually our entire vocabulary. We wandered around Flushing and in Manhattan's Chinatown on Sundays with our parents and imagined connections between our 2 most familiar stomping grounds and the Who's native London neighborhood of Shepherd's Bush. After witnessing some heinous screaming match between Dad and the Empress Mother in our laundry or in Chinatown, Herman and I would instinctively turn to each other and talk, saying, "How do you think he does it? I don't know." And by mimicking Pinball Wizard, we found a favorite new pastime. We also found a way to deflect some of life's unpleasantries with the mighty shield of rock and roll. So at that point, I was 7 and Herman was 12, and we could still hang. But of course, as he got into his teenage years, like being 13 and 14, no teenager wants to hang out with their 10 or 11-year-old little brother. So I started spending most of my time in the laundry with just me and my parents and Tommy. that album became like my constant companion. The Empress Mother encouraged my drawing and let me do this alongside her break station table. Repeatedly listening to Tommy while alternately gazing at the album cover artwork and drawing my own little pictures completely captivated my 9-year-old psyche and mind, deepening the spell with each playing. But inevitably, my reverie would be broken by a bigger power. The power of the Empress Mother drowning out Tommy with what my 9-year-old self called that dreaded pots and pans music, or what the cultured world calls Cantonese opera. Yes, in the early 1970s, the Eng dynasty was probably the only American household in which the kids were pleading with their parents to please turn that noise down. But in that sacred back room, we're not blasting me with shrill morality tales of supernatural Cantonese opera characters. The Empress Mother would frequently lecture me on the ways of the world beyond my little laundry fiefdom. Mo hong and ong atai, tek yen. O and hong and oki, mo hong and ong atai. There's no good people out there. They don't feel for people. All the good people you will ever need are right here at home. There are no good people out there. So for the next 30 years, through the sweeping worldwide changes of the 1970s, 1980s, and 1990s, within the walls of the Eng dynasty, the song remained the same for the dominating Empress Mother and her obliging last emperor of a youngest son. We could have lived in the 1870s, or the 1780s, or the 1690s. So that was an excerpt from the first chapter, and I'm going to read another excerpt from chapter 10, and then we can have some Q&A. And again, thank you very much for joining us. If you're just joining us, I just read from chapter 1 of Our Laundry, Our Town, and I'm going to read from Trip the Light, Gorgeous Mosaic. And as you'll see, this one actually starts with 2 lyrics, and one of them is a rap lyric, and the chorus is very simple. It's a rock me gung hey, and even though we can't see each other, when I say rock me gung hey, I'm going to say, see if you clap your hands 3 times, but maybe you could just do it even visually. Maybe we could see that as we go. So we could say, great, so we could clap our hands visually. Okay, so let me just give you a little more of so this is we'll pick up. This is me and my brother Herman, and this is back to our laundry town, and now this is the character I'll be reading from. Just remember this character as we go. Yeah, this was my my 1980s punk rap character, the Gung Hey Kid, and the Gung Hey Kid features prominently in the in this next one. So just remember this guy as we read from. This is from chapter 10. This is Trip the Light, Gorgeous Mosaic, Double Happiness, Discovering Playwriting and Activism, and we'll see if we can do the hand clap thing. Okay. Lose that shit. This ain't the mainland. I'm the Gung Hey Kid. Hope you understand. Don't do no kowtowing or no rickshaw. So don't be talking no dragons or the Great Wall. I ain't good in math. I don't know Kung Fu. Diddle fall Confucius and Fu Manchu. So don't mess with me or call me Bruce Lee, because ain't no one better than Kid Gung Hey. Rock me Gung Hey. Rock me Gung Hey. Rock me Gung Hey. Rock me Gung Hey. Yellow fever is a lot in this country. Now we're the so-called model minority. Truly don't mean shit if you think about it. Plenty still despise our slanty eyes, so don't overcompensate for your sorry state. You can't keep us in the laundry or the railroad track, because it takes a nation of billions to hold us people back. 3, 4, rock me Gung Hey. Rock me Gung Hey. Rock me Gung Hey. Gung Hey Fa Choi. Oh, it's great to see all the hand claps. Thank you. And now the second lyric is different. And this is actually my late mother singing a Cantonese lullaby.
Nhìn sang người mù, nhìn thiền ảm người xuôi, 岩上赛声，长期或是眼听曲子将将播，赛时为去谷谷声。
The translation of that is, people's lives are like dreams. Human nature has no taste, like water. People in this world, how long do we have? People's natures are like paper. Every sheet is thin. What we know is strange because everything is new. These two lyrics bookend my punk rap play with songs, The Gung Hey Kid. Rock Me Gung Hey is the show's finale, and depending on your perspective, it's either an homage or a blatant ripoff of Public Enemy's Fight the Power. But it's a tribute also to Do the Right Thing, the 1989 Spike Lee joint in which that song ignites the opening credits, along with some raw, spectacular dancing from Rosie Perez. People's Lives Are Like Dreams, the play's prologue and epilogue, is a traditional Cantonese lullaby that the Empress Mother used to sing around our laundry and in both Flushing palaces of the Eng dynasty. These two lyrics also represent the contours of my disposition during the late 1980s, early 90s multiculturalism movement. In New York City, this era was famously celebrated as the Gorgeous Mosaic by our first Black mayor, the late Honorable David N. Dinkins. The Gorgeous Mosaic era redefined the American frame to which I had been longing to belong my entire life. The number 8 holds special significance for the Chinese. It's a homonym of good fortune and a symbol of good luck and long life. Thus, 1988 portended to be a good year to start new things as well as to renew older ones. It was also the year of the dragon. Traditionally, the dragon symbolizes power, nobleness, honor, luck, and success. Alongside making the transition from working in the music business to director of public relations for Asian Cinevision, ACV, and discovering New York City's Asian American arts and activism world, I was also looking to rekindle dormant creative pursuits, the last of which were performing and songwriting forays with teenage punk rock bands, and you saw that photo just before. One of my first tasks and public events at ACV was to assist writer-performance artist Jessica Hagedorn and critic-curator Daryl Chin with their acclaimed literary series, Talk and Cheap. The series' first guest of 1988 was playwright David Henry Wong. He was to read from M. Butterfly, the play that would make his Broadway debut the following month. The ACV Talk and Cheap reading was the first New York City public reading from M. Butterfly. As Huang read startling passages from his play that would soon redefine the parameters of artistic explorations of East-West social, sexual, political relations, I was buzzing with a feeling I had not known since first hearing The Who's Tommy or David Johansen's Funky But Chic. Yes, as culturally sheltered as it may sound, it wasn't until the age of 25 that something besides rock and roll had as much of a primal and intellectual impact. But David Henry Wong's powerful play proved that there was a place for our voices and visions on the biggest theatrical stage in New York City and the world. M. Butterfly would go on to have a celebrated extended run on Broadway, even winning the 1988 Tony Award for Best Play for David Henry Wong and Best Actor for its star B.D. Wong. And as for this writing, no other Asian American playwright has won the Tony Award for playwriting. We must change that. The morning after that provocative first public reading from M. Butterfly, I decided to apply for a playwriting workshop instead of the screenwriting workshop I had been strongly considering at the Writer's Voice. This was the creative writing program of the 63rd Street YMCA on the Upper West Side. Because the more I thought about playwriting, the more I found this form to mirror what I love about rock and roll, and most distinctly, what I revere about rock and roll songwriters. Both the playwriting and songwriting processes alternate between the solitude of artistic inquiry as a writer, but that leads to the collaborative process of creating live performance and spectacle. Plays, they're also like songs in that they can be reinterpreted in endless styles, idioms, and genres for performances and productions. A few days after seeing one of the first M. Butterfly previews on Broadway, I was accepted into the playwriting workshop at the Writer's Voice. A few weeks later, still buoyed by the zeitgeist confirmation of M. Butterfly's fast becoming a barrier-breaking, history-making Broadway hit, I practically floated up the stairs through the swimming pool chlorinated air of the 63rd Street YMCA to my first playwriting class at the Writer's Voice. It was a magical time for a Chinese American to begin his journey as a playwright. And now we get into, and after changing my life as a playwright, David Henry Wong, and here's, I was lucky to have David has become a colleague, and he was a guest in one of my classes. He then changed my world by leading the protests against Miss Saigon. That was famously when, rather than saying they wanted to keep working with their star, Jonathan Pryce, the Miss Saigon production team said, there's no Asian Americans capable of performing that role. So David here, he really organized and galvanized our community to stand up for ourselves, and we did. Ultimately, it didn't change things, but it changed our world. We had a voice. And through David's activism, the NYU Graduate Musical Theater Writing Program went out of their way to really recruit Asian American students. And I'm honored that I was the first Asian American student in NYU's Graduate Musical Theater Writing Program. And there I developed a musical called The Gung Hae Kid that I rapped from before. And we'll pick it up right after graduation. In 1994, that's when The Gung Hae Kid became the first play or first full-length performance work written by an Asian American to be presented at the historic Nuyorican Poets Cafe. The Nuyorican Poets Cafe is the storied center of spoken word and activism founded in the 1970s by a group of New York City Puerto Rican activists led by Miguel Algarín and Miguel Pinheiro. In the early 1970s, Pinheiro became the first Puerto Rican playwright to be produced on Broadway with Short Eyes. This was almost a decade before Lin-Manuel Miranda was even born. It was an enormous affirmation for me and many of my fellow Asian American spoken word, theater, and music artists that Miguel Algarín, as well as the cafe's theater and poetry slam directors, Rome Neal and Bob Holman, welcomed us to that singular community that is the Nuyorican Poets Cafe. Just standing on the stage of the cafe for a poetry slam or Friday night, you could feel the power in that room, the power and the energy. I found myself in a community of artistry with a singular level of primal talent and diversity. And back then, the cafe felt like the very heart and soul of the gorgeous mosaic. For the Nuyorican Poets Cafe production of The Gung Hae Kid, I also had the added bonus of being the rhythm guitarist in the production's punk rap pit band. Before each performance, director Rome Neal would gather the entire cast, band, and crew into a circle on one of the upper floors of the cafe. And in the circle, we would share what we were grateful for or what we were troubled by that night. On opening night, I became very emotional during the circle check-in. I started crying as I lamented the fact that my dad would not physically be in attendance for this or any of my premieres. The tears continued to flow as I shared how grateful I was for everyone in the circle and all of the guests and humans downstairs in the cafe, especially the Empress Mother and my brother Herman. For this opening night pre-show curtain speech, Roman and Miguel introduced Herman and the Empress Mother, and the Empress Mother took a flashy bow for the ages. I guess I had to get the showbiz gene from somewhere. Every night, the prologue and epilogue ended with a recording of the Empress Mother singing "People's Lives Are Like Dreams." That's the audio we just heard a moment ago. On opening night, the voice of the play's prologue and epilogue, as well as the embodiment of its conscience and soul was seated at one of the cafe's front tables. Throughout the show, I kept watching the Empress Mother and Herman. I smiled as Herman visually reacted to the show's laughs, cries, and everything in between. I was even more moved by the Empress Mother's static facial expression. While she was clearly proud to be there, and I couldn't have been prouder to have her there, it was a heartbreaking visual and visceral revelation of the language barrier between us all these years. As mother and youngest son, we shared so much. Yet as a writer, I could never now fully share with her what was most important and vital to me. I regretted even more that I could not fluently speak, let alone write, any dialect of Chinese. In the end, the gorgeous mosaic was the most healing, empowering, and exhilarating period. It made most of us accept and process a more nuanced and complex portrait of who we were as a city, a society, and a world. Yet, inevitably, every answer of affirmation that the gorgeous mosaic offered posed even more complicated questions. The underside of the gorgeous mosaic era was the fight and resiliency required to celebrate and represent our unique identities, communities, and cultures. Stories and worlds often change on a whim. Other times, it takes an epidemic and everything in between. Each and every performance and work of art is a statement and celebration of being. All representation is personal and political. We must seize the moment and realize it while we can. Thank you. So those are the two chapters I want to share with you. And I just want to just a few more images. Then we kind of our Q&A. I just want to. This is the poster from the New York Poets Cafe production, and this is me getting to perform The Last Emperor Flushing in China, because the book is called Our Laundry, Our Town, and the Our Town part corresponds to yes, the Thornton Wilder play from Wisconsin. Thornton Wilder, his Americana play Our Town actually has a lot of Chinese influence, and coming from the outside, when I discovered this, it really made me feel even more agency with theater. And talking about the Chinese influence on Our Town, my wife, Wendy Wassel, and I, we got to do a Fulbright residency in Hong Kong where we taught Our Town to the Chinese students, and they wrote and performed their own plays in response. And while we were in residence there, I got to perform The Last Emperor Flushing in China, in Guangzhou. This is from that Guangzhou is sort of like the Guangzhou is to Toisan, sort of like what Manhattan is to Flushing. So I got to perform there, and this is from that performance. And this is the class all wishing us well. They are doing A's and W's for Alvin and Wendy with their hands. And then one last thing, bringing it all back home. This is that's me as my character, the last Emperor Flushing in Flushing Meadows Park, sort of mirroring where we were with the family. So that's sort of where the book goes from there. So I just want to thank everyone for sharing that, Ella. And maybe we could have some questions now too. We can throw it open to everyone. Thank you for listening.
Yeah, thanks so much, Alvin. That was really amazing. I'm really grateful. I'm going to turn it over to Cynthia, who will read some of the questions for you. Also, if you have any questions now, please just place them in the chat, and we'll ask Alvin those questions. So I'll turn it over to Cynthia to read some of those and get that sort of conversation going. Thanks.
Okay. So we have a few questions here. The first is, let me just see. Yeah. The first is, did you see the 8-pound livelihood exhibit at MoCA in the 1990s? I
did. Yes, I did. It was a great exhibition. Yes. And my parents came along a little after that. And I talked about it in the book. I couldn't, can't read everything, but the Chinese Hand Laundry Alliance, that in many ways, that was like the first Chinese American labor action in New York City. And that paved the way for people like my parents who came around a little bit later than that. That was in 1933. And what it was is just as like when the gold rush happened in San Francisco, where there were so many Chinese in the 19th century, all of a sudden they raised the licenses to become to mine gold so much more for Chinese, and it pushed them out. And then in New York City, they tried to do the same thing with laundry licenses, but the Chinese hand laundry lines, they gathered together and they really stood up, and that was a real turning point. So yes, 8-Pound Livelihood was a great exhibition. Thank you for that. Yes.
Fantastic. Let's see, we have a couple of questions here. You mentioned your parents' psychological warfare at home.
Mhm.
Can you speak to the mental health challenges in your community?
Yeah, that's especially then, I guess it goes hand in hand with well, my parents had an arranged marriage, like so many marriages of that time. And well, they really towed a balance where as little kids, we never doubted for a second their commitment to the family. So they established that and kept us fond, kept us in check that way, but also they really had contempt for each other. So it was an odd balancing act. And I think part and parcel of that was they didn't seek mental health assistance because that generation, they didn't seek any assistance because they remember they were schooled under the Chinese Exclusion Act. And for those who don't know, I just want to be clear that that was the first, and I would say, God help us, the last American law that made it illegal for one race of people to become citizens here. So because they were raised in under these conditions, they maintained pretty much till they passed away, for their whole life. They maintained an under the radar existence where they did not trust the government, did not trust anything, and they primarily only socialized with other laundry families, and definitely only other Toisan speaking families. So yes, so it was a symptom of a bigger thing where they needed the mental health assistance, but also they didn't want to seek any assistance because of these situations.
Interesting, because that then follows up, this person has a follow-up question. Do you feel the pressures placed on immigrants and people of color to assimilate exacerbated this? And then following again, what was the role of art and creative practice played for you in the transmuting some of these feelings and contending with this reality?
Right. Yes, and the pressure for, I guess the first part was the pressure on immigrants, just to there was a lot, because they as you know, there was no going back, because like the China they knew was really, my parents, when they were very young, they lived through 2 revolutions. They lived through a Japanese occupation. So it was a very turbulent time. And so, and then when they came here, there was a lot of pressure to succeed. And I think that's why they were at wit's end half the time too, because I just imagine being new parents in a new environment, a new culture, where you don't speak the language or you don't speak the lifestyle. It couldn't be more challenging in every way. So I'm sure that led to it too. And luckily the arts were always around. And I realized my punk rock beginnings might have been, I think my parents, to combat and create their own culture, their own cocoon, if you will, they played their Cantonese opera records really loud. As Spinal Tap would say, they played them at 11. They played that to volume 11. But so I think that just knowing the power of music as a force of rebellion even was there. And then by the time my parents could afford a house that was separate from our laundry, there was always a band in our garage. So music was always around us. So the music and the arts were always around us. So in that way, and being the youngest of 5, I had a lot of, for better and for worse, I had a lot of freedom.
Excellent. All right, next we have, let me see, just one moment. How does activism you saw in your youth compare with activism you see in Asian Americans today?
Yes, it's interesting. It's come full circle. Like when I was lucky, I was very young when I was like 6 or 7. I write about it. My another brother, my brother Vic. I'm the youngest of 5, as you saw, and my brother Vic was very much an activist in the late 60s, early 70s, and he took me to one of those Yellow Pearl rallies. So I got to see the legendary Yellow Pearl perform, and I could feel they were up in some ways. You never want to compare different generations' plights and different generations' challenges, but and of course they were the pioneers. That there was no Asian American movement or consciousness before the 60s, which grew out of the which grabbed the civil rights movement. And but now it's come full circle, because at least then it was primarily psychological and verbal bashing. And of course, in the past few years during the pandemic, it's become, physical violence. It's become attacks. So it's, every generation has its own challenges. And I think now, but both times, I think one of the best things, if you could say that, that's come out of all this rise of anti-Asian hate violence, I feel like our community has never been stronger or had more of a voice. And I'm so proud of the theater community, because I felt that in response to this rise of anti-Asian hate crimes, I've never seen so many Asian American theater productions on the off-Broadway level. It's like they're in double digits. So it's been great to see that real embrace and support. Like, you feel like we've got your back. We're going to have this dialogue. You're not here alone. And I felt that's one of the beauties of New York City and the arts. So I just felt, I really felt very strong embrace by that. So that's been great. So, and I think there's much more visibility now. So it's, in some ways, it's easier because we have much more visibility, much more of a voice. But in some ways, it's tougher because we at least then you didn't see as much of the physical violence against Asian Americans.
Oh, fantastic, interesting. How did you find the experience of connecting with the culture in Gujan when you are a diaspora from the U.S.?
It was very different. It was very, it was very complex. But one thing was pretty interesting. When they going back, what's Our Launch, Our Town? Your Our Towns that played by Thornton Wilder, and that's very influenced by Chinese opera. Because actually Wilder's father, who was also the governor of Wisconsin, right? He was also the and we're saying that because Cynthia is from Wisconsin, so it just turned out what a great coincidence. And
yes,
but also after I understand, I think his governorship didn't end well, but as far as I know, then after that somehow he became this is the senior Wilder, became the consul general to Hong Kong and Shanghai, the American consul general. And so Thornton Wilder spent part of his childhood there, and so it really influenced him. And then there's a great collection of letters between Gertrude Stein and Thornton Wilder. And I love that she calls him Thorny as only she can. Dear Thorny. But Thornton Wilder says, for my next play, I am stealing all the ideas from your Gertrude Stein's Making of Americans, along with the concept of the property manager from Peking Opera. So that property manager from Peking Opera became the stage manager in Our Town. So there's a lot of influence. And then also all the characters, it's I guess no spoiler alert, but by the end of midway through the first scene, you realize all these characters of Our Town, they are spirits of people who already passed through this mortal coil. I'd say, here comes Editor Webb. He died in 1930. And that's very Chinese opera too, because it's all mainly a lot of the spirit world. So the students in Hong Kong and Guangzhou, they immediately could recognize that this is all about the spirit world, just like Cantonese opera. But they also asked, these families in New England, are they from arranged marriages also? I said, I guess in many ways they were. So I think it's interesting. By that point, of course, Hong Kong, like us, is a former British colony. So there's been so much Western and English influence, British influence there. So they could really roll with it more in Hong Kong. Where Guangzhou, there's still it was really still much more rooted in Chinese culture. So we were able to get along well with both. And thankfully, my performance was presented by the U.S. consulate. So there was a lot of English-speaking audience, but it was very interesting to share both as a professor, to share Our Town and American theater, but then to thankfully have a chance to present my own work there. So it was really great to interact with them. But it was a little bit of a stretch in Guangzhou, but in Hong Kong it was an immediate connection.
Fantastic. It sounds like an amazing experience.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yes.
Next, do you have any advice for those of us who still have been trying to put their personal experience and stories on paper?
I think just to begin with, and hello Judy, thanks for joining us. And I think just really just get it all out, and don't, everyone's different, of course, too. Everyone's, but I think just I think the important thing is to just not edit and don't worry about structure and the total yet. Just really get it all out, and then later on start thinking about what structure, what format you want to put this in. But just really, it's a way of meditation, just a way of really personal exploration and processing, just to get it all out, just to really just keep getting it all out. And everyone's different. There's so many voice activism things now. Maybe just speak your story into your phone or anything, and just keep doing that, and really just write little, and also try different mediums, like maybe write, of course, prose. Maybe you want to write a poem to capture some of the essence of things, and just see what comes out. But it is true, right? The secret, someone said, the secret to writing is writing. You just have to do it and just really get to it. And then, of course, after that, then the harder work begins, because our writing is rewriting too. But I think in the beginning, just don't edit yourself. Just get it all there. Because, like, let's say in my playwriting classes, I've seen some students work on scene 1 until it's a fine polished stone, and then 10 minutes into working on scene 2, half of what they've done is now irrelevant. So just keep going.
Excellent. I'm going to go back. There was a comment from our first question going back to the show at the 8 Pound Livelihood. The same writer wrote, Betty Yu has a film on her grandfather. Not sure if that makes any sense to you, but adding that. Then there was another question going back to arranged marriages. What you touched on there, and this commenter wrote, why did arranged immigrant marriages endure even after they established residency? Any divorces or natural romance after?
It's funny, I guess, again, every family is different, but my parents' generation, they maintained it, where there were, even though there were sadly a lot of unhappy marriages, and even very like my parents had a very combative marriage, there was not a lot of divorces. So even though, but because I really think maybe that's the Chinese tenet of the greater good. So somehow they managed to convey, we felt totally secure in their commitment to our family, even though they were literally at each other's necks. So I mean, it's not funny, but I was just so how they maintain that. So there was a lot of romantic problems, a lot of unhappy relationships, but at least in my experience, I did not see a lot of divorce then. I should research that too, but anecdotally, there was not a lot of divorce, even though there were sadly a lot of unhappy marriages.
Absolutely. Does anyone else have any? Oh, here we have another one. Just came in. Why do you call your mom Empress Mother, but not your dad the Empress Father?
That's true. I guess because that grew out of, in many ways, this play, the memoir came out of two stage pieces. One was called The Last Emperor of Flushing, and one was in response to, it was a long multi-night play called The Kentucky Cycle. So as the Brits would say, I wanted to take the piss, and I did a short play called The Flushing Cycle. So I did that. And so in many ways, those two plays became like the foundation for the memoir. And because in The Last Emperor of Flushing, I'm elevating everything to a faux emperor syntax and language, my mother became the Empress Mother. And because the Last Emperor of Flushing is about the later part of my life, my dad died when I was very young, when I was 14. So he doesn't really play that big a role in that play. So that's the reason why he didn't get a royal title, because he's not really part of that play as much. That's why we called the Empress Mother. But good question, thank you.
Yeah, fantastic. Are there any other questions? Do we have? That might be.
Oh, there's more, and also too.
Oh, we got one more question. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
What's your next project?
Oh, okay. I'm actually doing something at the it's called in my early days, I was a punk rock person, but now I call myself an acoustic punk raconteur. So I still play my 3 chords, but I played acoustic guitar because I know that I have more of a facility with words than with music, and so I'm working with that, and I'm actually doing something with that at the New York Public Library is having a celebration of Asian Heritage Month, and I'm actually going to be workshopping that too. Can I put that in the chat? Let me just put that in the chat. That's going to be this Thursday, and part of that research, I will be coming back to Doris for that, because it's looking at Here Comes Johnny Yen Again. It takes off the opening line of the Iggy Pop and David Bowie song as Here Comes Johnny Yen Again. And as a teenager, I thought, could Johnny Yen be a Chinese punk rock character? Of course, it was really it was all about drug usage, and but they were actually paying homage to William S. Burroughs' Johnny N. And that led me down where, so I looked at growing up when I did in the 70s, a heroin chic culture. I thought, okay, this is very different. This is very different than my grandfather, because my grandfather was like, he died of an opium overdose. So I just wanted to put that out there then too. So I'm looking at contrasting those two things. So that's how that came about. Thanks for asking for that. Let me put that link in here if I could. I'm just
Okay, great.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for asking about that. That's the next thing. And I will be back at Doris to research that. So let me put that in the link here as well.
We have someone mentioning here, my child is similar to yours, Alvin. My parents were in arranged marriage, ran a laundry in the Bronx. My grandfather ran a laundry in Manhattan, and they originated from Canton and spoke, oh, I lost the,
Oh, Toyson. Oh, wow.
yeah.
Oh,
I have a
great.
question, actually.
Sure.
With your brother as a musician, have you done any other collaborations of any kind with your siblings?
That's funny. That's the thing where we're very Herman's he's the real musician. He can play anything, but he's much more. He's more of a player. And so we wrote one song once. We were going to do a musical, but we haven't done as much. And he's lived on the West Coast many years now. So no, we've not done a lot, but he's always so supportive. And he even chose this microphone and got a hold of me. So he's an audio expert. So we've done more in that way. But with thanks we were different, like, musical generations too. Like, him and his friends, they could really play, but then us punkers, we were much more about what we had to say than necessarily play.
Fantastic. Someone had asked about your social media handle, but I know we're going to be putting that in the end of the chat, so that'll be available for everyone. And that looks like, unless anything else has come in.
Thank you.
Yeah, a lot of thank yous. Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, this is wonderful. I feel like we had a lot of amazing questions, and the talk was really beautiful. And thank you just for being so generous. I felt like it was just nice to sort of get into maybe the headspace of your younger self and hear about your lived experience. So right now I'm just gonna paste in the chat. I pasted this earlier, but there is an offer through Fordham Press for Alvin's book with a discount. I placed that in there for folks who are interested in purchasing his book. And then also just more info about Doris. I just obviously want to thank everyone for being with us today, and thank Alvin for, again, being so generous and sharing their story.
Thank you.
So
I'd like to add too,
check those out.
I'd like to add, if you haven't been to 31 Chambers where Doris is, you've got to get there. It's an amazing space and a fantastic facility for research and for culture. So get over to 31 Chambers as well.
Thank you. I love that plug. I'm like, you kind of did a little bit of my job for me. This is wonderful. And I also pasted some information about Doris and some of our upcoming programs. We actually have another Lunch and Learn this Friday where we're listening to a podcast from Humanities New York on sort of reframing women's suffrage. So there's 2 more episodes left. We hold them on Fridays from 1 to 2 p.m. That information is in the chat as well. Yeah, just thanks everyone for being here, and I hope you have a great day. Thank you, Alvin, for sharing this work. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Hope to see you soon and work with you again soon.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Okay.
Bye. Have a good day.